Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. It's Monday today. It came packed with blues for global investors and reds for global markets. Stocks tanked the world over, pushed by fears of an Omicron surge. Cases are rising rapidly in many parts of the world. Lockdowns and restrictions have returned in some places. Memes are back on social media. The most popular one shows Santa Claus giving his nasal swab as he travels around the world. Needless to say, it's not funny anymore. Another holiday season marred by the Wuhan virus. The variant is new, Omicron, and there's a lot that we don't know about it. But if there's one lesson we've learned in the last 2 years, it's this: complacency can be deadly. The variant is spreading fast. But in about 4 weeks, only 12 deaths have been reported. There are concerns about how effective vaccines will be going forward. There's talk of booster shots and big pharma minting more money. New studies on what works and what doesn't have come out. On Gravitas tonight, we'll bring you an update on what's snowballing into a new wave of the pandemic. We'll discuss how this is different from the previous ones. Also on the show, Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai does a U-turn. She says she never made allegations of sexual assault. The Women's Tennis Association does not believe it. We'll tell you why. In Saudi Arabia, the unthinkable is happening. Men and women dancing with abandon at a 4-day-long rave party. Is the kingdom truly transforming, or is this a facade? We'll discuss that. This weekend, 2 countries hosted meetings on Afghanistan. India built consensus with regional stakeholders. Pakistan played a Taliban apologist and pushed its Kashmir agenda. And do you suffer from password anxiety? Do you worry that you'll be locked out of your accounts? If you do, you're not alone. We'll bring you a special report. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
At least 373 people have died in the strongest typhoon to hit the Philippines, making it one of the deadliest storms to slam the country. The Philippines Red Cross has said that there is complete carnage in coastal areas. The government ordered its military to send airplanes and naval vessels to deliver aid to cut-off regions. Democrat Senator Joe Manchin says he cannot back President Biden's $1.75 trillion social safety bill.
I cannot vote to continue with this piece of legislation. I just can't.
Dealing a fatal blow to the U.S. president's signature legislation. Meanwhile, the White House issues a stinging rebuke in return, accusing Manchin of going back on his word. Pro-Beijing candidates have swept to victory in Hong Kong's Patriots-only legislative election. In March, Beijing had passed a Patriots governing Hong Kong resolution, which altered the Legislative Council. Meanwhile, the voter turnout hit a record low amid China's crackdown on the city's freedoms. A top U.S. official says that at this juncture, Washington is not interested in opening an embassy in Afghanistan, as there are serious concerns over the security situation regarding the ISIS-K. At least one person has died during protests in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. These protests are taking place against a military coup in the country. Meanwhile, hundreds have been injured as protesters faced tear gas and stun grenades from security forces. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces another scandal. A photograph published by The Guardian shows the Prime Minister, his wife and 17 staff members in the Downing Street garden with bottles of wine and a cheese board.
Various pressures of the week, they would sometimes have a drink, and that's what you can see there. But that was primarily after the work meetings of the day.
Meanwhile, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab says that work meetings often take place in the 10 Downing Street garden. At least 8 people have died in massive floods in Malaysia as authorities face criticism over their rescue efforts. Unusually heavy rainfall has put a strain on emergency services across the nation. More than 3,200 people have been displaced due to the floods. Japanese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa returned to Earth after a 12-day journey into space, ending a practice run for his planned trip around the moon with SpaceX in 2023. The billionaire became the first space tourist to travel to the International Space Station in more than a decade. Australia have taken a 2-0 lead in the Ashes with the comprehensive 275-run victory in the day-night test in Adelaide. Resuming on 82 for 4, England did well to take things into the final session on the back of Jos Buttler's determined rearguard. But they were eventually dismissed for 192, with Jai Richardson on the pick of the bowlers with a maiden 5-wicket haul. 20-time Grand Slam champion Rafael Nadal has tested positive for COVID-19 after returning home from an exhibition tournament in Abu Dhabi. Nadal made his return after a long injury layoff last week in close defeats to Andy Murray and Denis Shapovalov. The Spaniard says he has mild symptoms, but he has admitted the possibility of missing the start of the 2022 season and the Australian Open.
The Indian markets were in for a free fall today. The bleeding began 2 weeks ago, but today the markets hemorrhaged. The Sensex was down by more than 1,000 points. In 2 weeks, this index has fallen by nearly 3,000 points. Same with Nifty. It recorded a fall of over 300 points today. In 14 days, Nifty has lost close to 1,000 points. Less than 4 months ago, traders were celebrating. Indian stock markets were at a record high. In fact, they were outperforming every major index. Foreign investors were pouring money into India. In September this year, they bought nearly $9 billion worth of Indian stocks. Today, investors of all sizes lost more than $130 billion. Let me repeat that. Investors who poured money into the Indian market have lost $130 billion today. What explains this? Who ended the bull run? The Wuhan virus, more specifically the Omicron variant. Omicron has reached more than 80 countries in the world now. It's a nightmare that's spooking investors. Stock exchanges around the world are counting their losses. Asian markets were down by as much as 2% today. Japan, Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, they all reported losses today. European stocks fell the most in 3 weeks. American markets are also seeing red. So why are global investors so worked up about Omicron? Well, they're worried about the trajectory of this variant. There are 5 worrying trends. Number 1, global caseloads are rising. Number 2, leading nations are becoming hotspots. Number 3, restrictions are back. Number 4, vaccines are proving to be less effective or ineffective in some cases. And number 5, there are growing instances of social unrest. And all of this was triggered by Omicron. So are we back to where we started? How serious is Omicron? Let's decode these trends. Number 1, the global infection rates, they're up again. In October, around 300,000 people were getting infected on a daily basis worldwide, 300,000 every day, the world over. As of December 18th, more than 500,000 people tested positive every day. The reason is Omicron. And the world is failing to contain it. Trend number 2, the rise of more hotspots. At least 89 countries have confirmed cases of Omicron now, which means this variant has reached every major continent. It's unavoidable. Going by one estimate, Omicron has now infected more than 60,000 people worldwide. 12 deaths have been reported from this variant, all of them in the United Kingdom. 12 deaths. What about India? So far, more than 160 cases of Omicron have been found in India. The first cases were detected on the 3rd of December. In 17 days, we have more than 160 recorded cases. There's no denying that this variant spreads quickly. Southern Africa was the original hotspot of Omicron. We blamed vaccine inequity for that. But now new infection zones have emerged, and these are regions with the highest vaccination rates in the world, like the United States and Europe. They're reporting cases. The US has one of the biggest vaccine stockpiles in the world. It still cannot tame the virus. More than 125,000 Americans are testing positive every day. Hospitalizations have shot up by 20% in 2 weeks. Now, we're not sure if all of these cases are of Omicron. But 45 American states have detected this variant so far. America's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says he's worried. He says Omicron is raging across the world, and it is the most transmissible form of the Wuhan virus yet.
The most transmissible virus of COVID that we had to deal with thus far. It has a doubling time of about 3 days, which means if you do the math on that, you see how quickly over a period of time that the dominant variant will be Omicron, as it is in South Africa, as it is now approaching that in the UK.
Cases of Omicron are doubling in less than 3 days. This variant is proving to be difficult to contain. It is proving to be a serious challenge for Europe. And that brings me to the third worrying trend, lockdowns and restrictions. They're back in some places. Several European nations have already issued orders. A nationwide lockdown has been imposed in the Netherlands. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom, Denmark, Germany, Ireland, France and Belgium have all reimposed restrictions. In some countries, crowds are not being allowed to gather in public places. Others have slapped travel restrictions and mask mandates. So Christmas is more or less ruined for the West. Countries like Germany believe a massive fifth wave is coming.
Auch ich gehe von einer massiven fünften Welle aus.
I too expect a massive fifth wave. I am in close contact with my colleagues in England, both politically and scientifically. We were still discussing this yesterday, and the colleagues are saying that what they are seeing there exceeds everything they have seen so far.
Also übertrifft, was also in der gesamten Pandemie bisher beobachtet wurde.
That's the fear in Europe. But in Israel, the fifth wave has already begun. Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has issued a warning. He believes more people could get sick in the coming days.
Ladies and gentlemen, the time we bought is running out. Omicron is already in the country, from the Knesset to the kindergartens, and it spreads quickly. The numbers are still not high, but it's a very contagious variant, doubling itself every 2-3 days as we see around the world. It's possible to say that the fifth wave has begun.
Why is the West so worried? It's because of trend number 4, the vaccines. They may not be as effective against Omicron. There is now a lot of data on vaccines. Reports say most of the existing vaccines will not be able to stop an Omicron infection. Vaccines from AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson, Russia's Sputnik V shot, and the Chinese vaccines might struggle. Some reports say Pfizer and Moderna shots have a better chance, but only when you take a booster. Now, I want to underline something here very, very clearly. All vaccines may have a reduced efficacy against Omicron, all of them. But they still protect against severe illness and hospitalization. So if you've not taken a shot yet, that's the first thing you need to do. Take a vaccine. Yes, pharma companies are chasing profits. Yes, booster shots sound like a very lucrative idea for them. Yes, it seems like an endless cycle of vaccines and boosters as the virus keeps mutating. But frankly, at this point, we don't have a choice. Vaccines can still save lives. Even if they cannot prevent infection, they can help you avoid hospitalization. So take that shot. What about immunity from previous infections? If you've had a bout of COVID in the past, can the Omicron variant still infect you? Honestly, we don't know for sure. A study did come out last week. It said the risk of reinfection with the Omicron is more than 5 times higher. But this is one study. We need more to establish this. There is no need to be alarmed, but there's every reason why you should be on alert because Omicron is spreading like wildfire and that's causing unrest. That's the fifth worrying trend that we have for you tonight. Protests have erupted in Europe. People are taking to the streets again. They're opposing new restrictions and vaccine mandates. In some instances, the protests have turned violent. Look at what happened in London on Sunday. Angry protesters clashed with the police. Why? Because the government has decided to reimpose restrictions. Violence over pandemic restrictions, questions over the efficacy of vaccines, a growing list of hotspots, lockdowns, a new worrying variant and predictions of new waves. 2021 seems to be ending just like it began. But the silver lining in this dark, dark pandemic cloud is the rapid advancement of medical science. We have vaccines, we have medicines, we have experience. We should fare better. So let me end with what I've been saying for weeks now. Prepare, don't panic. In 1938, Mao Zedong said this to his party's men: seek truth from facts. That's what he said. Seek truth from facts. It's actually a very old Chinese expression. It talks about the pursuit of truth and research. But Chairman Mao was not talking about that truth. He was talking about the communist truth, his party's convenient version of truth. And since then, it has become part of every Chinese leader's strategy. Revision of history? Say it's part of seeking the truth. Invade foreign lands? Blame it on China's original truth. The fact is, truth in China is not absolute. Truth is what the party says it is. On Sunday, we saw the latest example of this. Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai was speaking to a Singaporean daily 48 days back, remember. She went public with her Me Too story. But on Sunday, she changed her story. She said people have misunderstood her. Listen to this.
一点是非常重要的，我从未说过、写过任何人性侵我，这一点是要非常强调清楚的啊。然后关于微博，首先呢是我个人隐私的问题，那已经有可能这个大家有很多的误解，所以呢。不存在任何就是说
Well, those were Peng Shuai's words. But we all know who wrote them. The Chinese Communist Party. There are no two ways about this. We've read Peng Shuai's Weibo post from November. It was emotional, it was detailed, it was genuine. So what explains this U-turn? Political intimidation. Imagine how powerful the party must be. 48 days back, Peng Shuai accused a former Chinese premier. Look at what's happened since then. First, she went missing. Nobody knew whether the country's biggest tennis star was even alive. Then a so-called email emerged. Again, most likely dictated by the Communist Party. And finally, she was staged at a restaurant. As if there was no controversy, no allegations, just another day for Peng Shuai eating out with friends. The final act was Sunday's interview, what you just saw. This time, it was a complete denial. Do you see the pattern here? First, intimidate the victim, maybe bully or kidnap her. Second, buy time with fake emails and staged public events. And finally, make the same person take back her words. If there's no allegation, there is no crime. If there's no crime, there is no need for a probe. This is how you kill the Me Too movement. We talk about systemic abuse. Well, this is systemic cover-up. That's how China does it. And credit to the Women's Tennis Association because they're not buying it. Here's what the WTA statement says, and let me read it out for you. As we have consistently stated, these appearances do not alleviate or address the WTA's significant concerns about her well-being and ability to communicate without censorship or coercion. We remain steadfast in our call for a full, fair and transparent investigation. That pretty much covers it. The entire Chinese state machinery is attacking one woman. The state media ignored her claims. The diplomats are calling it politicization of sport. The cyber cops are censoring social media. They're taking down articles linked to Peng Shuai. And you know the worst part of this? The alleged assaulter has not even spoken yet. Zhang Gaoli, the former Chinese premier. He's neither denied it nor accepted it. He has said nothing. And why would he? He's got the entire Chinese regime battling his case. That is the communist truth. An alternate reality where every communist is perfect, where Chinese leaders can do no wrong, where accusers are misunderstood. How does China create this perfect truth? With the help of their trusted spokesman, the state media. It's a pretty straightforward relationship. Beijing orders, state media obeys. That's how they function. If you want to get China's reaction on any global event, all you have to do is read the Global Times or head to the CGTN or Xinhua. Their op-eds are basically government statements. But what if you challenge this system? What if state media tries to find its voice? Well, they get sacked. And that's what happened to this man, Hu Xijin. He was the editor-in-chief of Global Times for 16 years. Officially, he says he retired, but rumor is Beijing benched him. You're probably familiar with Hu Xijin's work. I would not call him a journalist or even an editor. He's more of an internet troll. His job was to basically offend everybody except his masters in Beijing. But last month, he slipped up. He wrote an op-ed criticizing the lack of media freedom in China. These are his words. Quoting again, "Frankly speaking, media practitioners have been subject to increasing restrictions for some time. I feel deeply that it is becoming more and more difficult to do media." That's what he wrote. Beijing read this article, and their reaction was quite simple. If it's difficult to quote-unquote do media, then don't do it. 1 month later, Hu Xijin retires. Is this coincidence? Well, in China, there is no such thing as coincidence. And that op-ed, by the way, was taken down, but it was too late. China decided that Hu Xijin's truth was different from theirs. And just like that, he was gone. 460,000 Twitter followers, hundreds of articles singing praises of Xi Jinping, all of it down the drain. Both these controversies, Hu Xijin and Peng Shuai, suggest the same trend. Party above all. Chinese editors are great as long as they remain stooges. Chinese athletes are heroes as long as they do not accuse the leaders. Only one truth matters in China. And that truth does not belong to victims of sexual assault. It does not belong to journalism or to activists. In China, truth is a communist monopoly. Now to Saudi Arabia. And let me say this up front. You should brace yourself for what's coming next for this story. The de facto leader of the Islamic world, the guardian of the two holiest sites in Islam, Saudi Arabia did the unexpected this weekend. It threw a giant rave party, a 4-day electronic music festival complete with psychedelic lights and international DJs. The images that you see, they're from Saudi Arabia. This giant rave party was held in the deserts of Riyadh with the blessings and money of the Saudi royal family. That's the House of Saud. They fully endorsed and sponsored this carnival. It was attended by artists from all over the world. Tiesto, Martin Garrix, David Guetta, Afrojack. You name them, the world's leading DJs performed at the rave. Their excitement was evident in their statements.
It was the first time that there was going to be women and men being able to dance together. And, you know, that was also a very historical moment. And I was happy to be part of this. So, you know, I think, you know, of course, there's more things to be done to improve the country, but I think they are opening and really going to the right direction, giving more rights to women. You know, like 4 years ago, women couldn't drive, and now they can come to a David Guetta concert and dance. You know, it's a huge evolution.
It's a huge evolution indeed. Just look at the images and videos from the event. Saudi men and women dancing with abandon, swaying to the beats of Western music. No gender segregation, no full-length robes, no face veils, or any religious restrictions for that matter. All of this was unthinkable in Saudi Arabia just a few years back, but now it's happening. And by the way, this rave party comes close on the heels of a film festival, the Red Sea International Film Festival, the first of its kind to be held in Saudi Arabia. It was a star-studded affair. It saw women strutting the red carpet in sleeveless gowns, a woman filmmaker winning the Best Director award. and an openly queer man winning Best Actor. What do you make of these changes? The sands are clearly shifting in Saudi Arabia, it's evident. This socially conservative kingdom is trying to shake off its regressive image. It's limiting the role of religion in public life and pitching itself as a modern, liberal and tourism-friendly kingdom. And this, we say, is welcome change. Although the critics of Saudi Arabia call it a facade, they insist that the Saudi society is not witnessing any fundamental, meaningful change. Is there merit in the argument? Let's try to find out. As all of you know, ever since Mohammed bin Salman was named the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, he's embarked on a liberalization drive. He's loosened gender segregation norms. He's reopened cinemas, allowed women to drive, allowed them to enter stadiums, even allowed them to undertake the Hajj without a male guardian. In a way, MBS has defanged the country's religious police that not too long ago would dictate every facet of daily life. And these are all remarkable reforms. They deserve applause. But I have to say, they're also half measures, and very late ones at that. Some very problematic issues still persist in the Saudi society. Saudi Arabia continues to arrest dissidents. It continues to extend prison terms of activists. It continues to detain the rich over allegations of corruption. There's a constant tinkering of power structures. Arbitrary reshuffling of personnel and lawmakers whom the Crown Prince sees as potential challengers. Political reform remains a taboo. Yes, women can now drive, and it's welcome change, but the activists who demanded this very same change earlier continue to languish in Saudi prisons. Yes, the country has promised to remove the death penalty, but it remains a world leader in capital punishment. Yes, it has tried to improve societal freedom, but it's yet to punish those who made dissidents disappear. So for every reform that Riyadh introduces, there's a crackdown that it fails to justify or undo. You see, transformation of a society cannot happen by piecemeal reform. An image makeover cannot happen by selectively eliminating some ills. If the Saudi leadership is serious about shedding its regressive past, it will have to do more than throwing dance parties. Have you heard about the Golden Triangle or the Golden Crescent? I'll give you a clue. It is related to our last story about rave parties. When you hear about raves, what's the first thing that pops in your mind? Obviously drugs, illegal drugs. That's what the Golden Triangle and Crescent are about. They're the biggest opium-producing regions in the world. Why should you care about them? Why should we be talking about them? Because right in the middle of these two regions is India. Let me pull up a map. The Golden Triangle straddles Myanmar, Thailand and Laos. 3 countries, but most of the opium comes from Myanmar. The Golden Crescent is more to the west. It straddles Central and South Asia, basically Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now, these two regions keep the world high. Together, they produce most of the world's heroin. But things got better in the last 2 decades. Democracy came to Afghanistan and Myanmar. Opium cultivation tumbled. The war on drugs seemed to be working for a while. Enter 2021. This year was horrible for both the countries. The Taliban took power in Afghanistan. The military toppled the government in Myanmar. The result? Nobody cares about drugs anymore. The Taliban are busy targeting Afghan minorities and women. The Myanmar junta is busy crushing protests. So the drug mafia has a free run in both the countries. Let's start with the Golden Crescent. We know that every producer needs a middleman. For Afghanistan, that middleman is Pakistan. It's a well-oiled machinery. The opium is grown near the Af-Pak border in places like Kandahar and Helmand. From there, the drugs are transported through land to Pakistani ports. And there's a lot of tacit support from Islamabad for this. The local dons get a free pass. The government officials often look the other way. That's how it works. And so these drug shipments make it to sea. In rare cases, foreign navies catch them. I can give you examples. In August, Sri Lanka seized a fishing vessel with 290 kilograms of heroin. In September, they seized 2 ships. They were carrying around 500 kilos of heroin. The same month, India also made a huge drug bust. Around 3,000 kilograms of heroin was seized at the Mundra port in Gujarat. We're talking about millions of dollars here. Where do you think this money goes? To the drug mafia, to extremist groups. The Taliban may have promised to ban opium cultivation, But they have failed. Their warlords like the drug money. They like the shady jobs created by opium trade. It's the same story in Myanmar. The junta is reeling under sanctions. It is busy killing democracy. So drugs are not really a big priority. But Myanmar's neighbors cannot afford to ignore this crisis. The drugs produced in Myanmar do not stay there. They're shipped to Southeast Asia. The numbers support this. This year, Malaysia seized drugs worth $180 million. That's a 150% rise compared to last year. In Laos, crystal meth busts have risen 6 times. 2 months back, Laos made Asia's largest ever drug bust. 55 million meth tablets and 1.5 tons of crystal meth. Imagine if these drugs made it to the market. Imagine the damage they could do. India must also take note of this drug trade. 2 reasons why. Number 1, to protect Indian citizens from drug abuse. India lies in the middle of the Golden Triangle and the Golden Crescent, like we just showed you. So drugs can enter from both sides. In fact, it's already happening. Earlier this month, drugs worth 500 crore rupees were seized in Manipur, 54 kilograms of brown sugar and 155 kilograms of meth. One trafficker from Myanmar was also arrested. If these drugs trickle into the market, they could kick off a drug epidemic. So India should pay attention. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2, the security threat. Pakistan's deep state has consistently weaponized drugs. It has a 2-pronged strategy. A, use the drug money to fund terror, and B, destabilize border states by getting the youth addicted. And this is already happening in Kashmir and Punjab. So what can India do? Well, be more vigilant. Sweep the borders for drug trade routes. Conduct more checks and raids. Educate our youth on the evils of narcotics. Unfortunately, this is the price you pay for having bad neighbors. You have usurpers who don't care about drugs. You have broke governments who need the drug money. And you have terror sponsors trying to weaponize these drugs. Caught in the middle is India. It's not an ideal place to be. But with regular monitoring and good awareness, India can avoid this drug epidemic. India will also have to strengthen its partnerships. It will have to strike alliances with like-minded countries to ward off these threats. And with this in mind, India recently held a dialogue with 5 Central Asian nations: Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan and Kyrgyzstan. 5. The foreign ministers of all of these countries were in New Delhi over the weekend. They discussed ways to deal with the Taliban and to build consensus over regional peace. Interestingly, this meeting coincided with another gathering in Islamabad, a gathering of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. OIC member nations sent their delegates to Islamabad to discuss Afghanistan. But like always, Pakistan made the meeting about itself. It played a Taliban apologist and pushed its Kashmir agenda. Here's a report.
On Sunday, 2 significant meetings were held on either side of the border. The agenda was more or less the same. The intention, not so much. In New Delhi, foreign ministers of 5 Central Asian nations attended a dialogue with India's External Affairs Minister to build what they called regional consensus on Afghanistan. As the meeting got underway, 688 kilometers away in Islamabad, another one kicked off around the same time. The foreign ministers of OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, gathering in the Pakistani capital to solve what they called an imminent economic collapse in Afghanistan. This meeting was Pakistan's way of telling India that it has an upper hand when it comes to Afghanistan, that it has the support of every stakeholder in Afghanistan. What Pakistan did instead was embarrass itself, all thanks to its Prime Minister, Imran Khan. He first played an apologist for the Taliban's diktats on women, like not allowing girls to attend schools. He justified this by calling it a difference of opinion, culture and society.
When we talk about human rights, every society is different. Every society's idea of human rights and women's rights are different. We give stipends to the girl's child's parents to put the girls into school. But in a tribal districts or the district adjoining Afghanistan, if we are not sensitive to the cultural norms of those people, even with stipends, they won't send their girls to school.
After playing an apologist, it was time to play victim. Imran Khan raked up the Kashmir issue, an issue that wasn't even on the agenda. Addressing the gathering, Imran Khan called for a unified plan on Kashmir. A plan to make the Muslim world corner India over Kashmir. Too bad he didn't find any takers. This meeting was about Afghanistan. Pakistan made it about itself. How could anything significant come out of it? The only thing the gathering agreed upon was establishing a joint fund to channel financial aid to Afghanistan. Compare that with the meeting India held. It was a small meeting, but with meaningful outcomes. New Delhi hosted the foreign ministers of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan and Kyrgyzstan. 5 countries that are not only Afghanistan's neighbors, but key players in the evolving security situation. The foreign ministers of all 5 came to India and sent their deputies to the OIC meeting in Pakistan, a gesture that signifies the importance they attach to India as a force for good. What did they discuss? A host of things. 1. They agreed that they share a broad regional consensus on Afghanistan, a consensus with the same motives of combating terror and restoring peace. 2. They agreed to establish joint working groups for free movement of goods between India and Central Asia. And 3. They agreed to utilize alternative routes like the Chabahar port for trade. Given Pakistan's control on land trade from India to Central Asia, the contrast between the 2 meetings couldn't be more stark. India's meeting was all about finding solutions to the Afghan crisis, in tandem with Central Asian countries. Pakistan's meeting looked more like a forum to justify the Taliban's regressive policies. Not to mention, push Islamabad's own nefarious agenda on Kashmir. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
To Chile now, the southernmost country in the world has elected a new president, Gabriel Boric, a leftist millennial, the youngest man ever to be elected president in Chile's history. He's just 35 years old and promises to transform his country in a way that meets the expectations of the youth. Here's a report.
Meet Gabriel Boric, a leftist millennial set to rule the southernmost country in the world, Chile. Gabriel Boric will be its new president, the youngest president ever to lead the country. He's just 35 years old, but his ambitions are rather bold. He's been called the most left-wing president of Chile since Salvador Allende, who was overthrown in 1973. What has he done to deserve this title? He has made promises. Promises to raise the minimum wage in Chile, to reduce the cost of education and healthcare, to expand the country's social safety net, to fight climate change in the country, and to extend rights to native people as well as gays and transgenders. These are all the promises that Gabriel Boric made in his election campaign. Promises that helped him defeat a far-right rival by a huge 10% margin. That's not all. He is also the first president to win with the largest number of votes in Chilean history. This is despite his young age and lack of experience in politics.
I'm going to be the president of all Chileans, of those who voted for me, of those who did not. Of those who did not vote, because I think it is important at this time that from the first magistracy, we are able to seek to represent all of Chile.
Gabriel Boric was born in 1986, the son of a chemical engineer and a public employee. He studied law at the University of Chile, but could never finish the course due to his activism. He became involved in student politics in 2011 was elected to the country's Congress in 2013, was sworn in to the Chamber of Deputies in 2014, was re-elected to the position in 2017, decided to run for presidency in 2021, and won to everybody's surprise. Bearded, tattooed, and rarely seen wearing a tie. Boric was considered a dark horse in the presidential race. He was popular but not enough to be called president material. His victory, however, has settled all doubts. It has revealed the changing face of Chilean politics. Boric's victory was largely fueled by Chile's youth, by millennials who were fed up with decades of divisive policies and are said to have voted in overwhelming numbers. Gabriel Boric's victory, and with the wave of support pouring online and on the streets, is proof. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now let's try an experiment. Take out your phones and do as I say. Check every app that requires a password to log in. I'll help you out. Your music apps, your food delivery apps, your Twitter, Instagram, your Uber, Netflix, your email. I hope I didn't miss any. If all of these apps require you to log in, they need you to punch in your username and your password. Now here's the experiment. Can you remember all of these passwords? We're talking about a dozen secret words with special characters. Can you remember all of them? Chances are you can't. Does that give you anxiety? The idea that you can't remember your passwords, the idea that you could be locked out of your bank account or your debit card. If it does, you're not alone. Password anxiety is a real thing, and we've all experienced it. Let me tell you about a survey that was done in the US. Around 2,000 Americans were quizzed about their passwords. Here's what they found. 63% of them kept getting locked out of their accounts. Why? Because they can't remember their password. 65% people say that they have to write down their password or else they will forget. What do you do in such cases? Most of us will reset our password. But even that doesn't work all the time. 57% people say they forget their new password after resetting it. And this leads to password anxiety. 2 in 3 people avoid websites if they forget the password. These numbers really make you wonder, how on earth do we humans function? Say thanks to your mobile phone. Our accounts are already logged in, so we don't have to remember each and every password. But what if you lose your phone? Would you be logged out forever? 57% people say yes, they would be. Without our phones, most of us would be logged out, which means no bank transfers, no movies, no social media, which is why remembering a password is so much pressure. You know what the experts say? Set strong passwords. Think of complicated words, which is great advice, but what if I have 10 different accounts? How will I remember 10 different and complicated passwords? It's not easy. So for most people, they follow a shortcut. Basically an easy password. Let me show you a list of the most popular passwords in the world. At number 1 is 123456. That's the password. Number 2, 12345678 Number 3 is picture 1. Number 4 is the word password. That's the password. And number 5 is 12345678. These, believe it or not, were the most common passwords in 2021. Now, if you have one of these, I have one piece of advice for you. Change it immediately. You're a sitting duck for hacking. It takes less than 1 second to access these passwords, so get them changed immediately. As for password anxiety, there is no sure-shot solution. You could try shifting to biometrics. Most mobile devices offer face recognition and finger scanners now. It means one less password to remember. You could also try one-time passwords or OTPs. Websites will send you a code every time you try to log in. Type that in and you're good to go. Again, that's one less password to remember. These are some techniques you could try. They don't eliminate passwords really, but they reduce the pressure on you to remember them. We have enough things, you see, giving us anxiety already. A secret code should not be one of them. As consumers, we cannot solve these issues ourselves. We need app makers to change some of this. We need mobile makers to innovate, because password anxiety and fatigue has serious consequences. You may start using weak passwords or use the same password everywhere, or write your password on a piece of paper. If you do this, it's an open invitation to hack. I'm afraid I don't have a cure for password anxiety. But here's what I will say. Take your time while setting your passwords. Don't get worked up if you forget them. Don't write them down, certainly not. And if you can't remember, you can always reset. Yes, it is going to take more time, but as always, it's better than getting hacked. If you have a solution, write to us. We'll wrap the show, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.
Pero no puede pasar. Frente cámara. ¡Empezó! ¡Muchacha! Ahí está. Cuando dice el árbitro. Perdieron. Corre, oye, con. Por aquí,